Hello people, and welcome back to Everywhere Tools, where, well, today I'm supposed to be working outside, but it is absolutely chucking it down and blowing a hoolie out there, so I am stuck in the van at the moment. So this is what it's like outside. So the waves are crashing over the harbour and it is blowing a gale. So I'm in the van, and I thought while I was here I'd just to share a few tips with you that I've picked up along the way as a carpenter. So I've been a carpenter for nearly 30 years now, and yeah, I just thought I'd share I think we've got 5 tips I'm going to share with you I've picked up along the way that have helped me really, and none of them involve picking up any tools whatsoever. So it's something that we can all do if you've got tools or not. So my first tip is going to be, and I think this is, I've put it first because I think it's the most important one. So we'll start off with the most important one, and that is that you have to be reliable. You've got to be reliable in the building trade, and me as a carpenter, you've got to turn up. You must turn up. So if you're employed by a contractor, then obviously you have to turn up every day. But if you're self-employed, sometimes it can be a bit different. So if you're subcontracting to someone, say like you're still on building sites but you're subcontracted, you've still got to turn up every day, and you've got to be reliable. Because if you're not, they're just going to ditch you after a while. If you keep having days off or afternoons off, or you know someone's sick and you can't come in, and I'm sick, I can't come in, and my dog's poorly and I've got to take my kid to nursery and pick my kid up from nursery, or whatever it is. I mean, we all have those things, and we all have those things in our lives that you can't get over, but you have to find a way to be reliable. Like if you're working on site and the contractor says, so I need people to come in this Saturday because we've got to finish this site, we've got to finish this job, are you up for coming in and get it done? And obviously if you say yes to getting up on a Saturday morning, then you have to make sure that you do that. You can't sort of, get your wages on a Friday night and go out on a Friday night and wake up on Saturday morning and think, oh, I'm not going in, because you've let a lot of people down who are relying on you. And you turn up Monday morning and the contractor says, well, where were you? We're supposed to get this job done, and like you weren't in, and I had to phone somebody else, and blah blah blah, and we can't keep going on like this. So reliability is the key, I think. For me personally, a quick story. So years and years ago, excuse me, I used to do agency work. I didn't find my own work. I had an agency that used to do that for me, and they would phone me up and with different jobs. And this really good job came up once, working on Canterbury Cathedral. There's a site on Canterbury Cathedral, really high-end job, and I went on there as an agency worker. Really keen. I was really reliable. I used to turn up all the time. I was definitely more reliable than the other agency workers, who one by one they slowly got rid of because they weren't reliable, and they needed people. And then it turned out I was more reliable than some of the carpenters that were actually employed by the company. I was more reliable than them. So in the end, they offered me a job. So I was actually employed for a bit by this company. As I say, we've done this really high-end job in Canterbury Cathedral. And then after that, I was up in London working on mansions, and they'd done stuff in Buckingham Palace and Lloyd's of London, and all places like that. And I wasn't necessarily the best carpenter on the job. There's certainly guys that have been there, you know, that definitely had more knowledge than I did. But a lot of them weren't reliable. So it doesn't matter. You can be the best carpenter there is and know everything there is about carpentry. But if you're only there half the week, or you keep having days off and you're not reliable, then they're going to get rid of you. So I'd say if you can do that, if you can nail that, I reckon you'll be about 50% there already. If you can just get that one thing sorted. Tip number 2 for you. I would say I've put this one second, although I still think it is really, really important, but it sort of comes just below being reliable, and that is you have got to be clean and tidy. If you're working on the sites, then you know, don't just leave it up to the labourers to tidy up your mess. You know, they do that as part of their job, but you know, it's your responsibility to keep your work area clean and tidy and safe. You leave stuff laying about that people can trip up, that's really dangerous. But yeah, you've got to be clean and tidy up after yourself. And then particularly for me now, running my own jobs, you know, I have to tidy up after all the other trades on my own jobs who aren't necessarily tidy. I've got, you know, got to keep the job tidy, keep myself tidy. If I'm in someone's house and I'm knocking a wall down for an extension or whatever, then you can't just leave the house in a mess. You know, you've got to tidy up. So being tidy, you know, sometimes it is a pain on a Friday when you just want to go home and you got to spend an hour taking up the dust sheets and hoovering and whatever it is. But it really does speak volumes, especially to your customers and to your contractors. I'd much rather people say, oh, that Marcus is a good carpenter and he's really, really tidy, isn't he? It's like, I really love it that he's so tidy. I'd rather people say that to me rather than say that Marcus is a good carpenter, but man, he is so messy and untidy and he always leaves a mess everywhere. You know, you can still be a good carpenter, but it's better to be a good carpenter and be tidy at the same time. So that is excuse me, tip number 2 for you. Tip number 3, I'd say, is to be willing to do jobs that aren't necessarily anything to do with carpentry. I think a lot of carpenters, especially when I was starting out, when I was younger, you know, especially when I was qualified, I'm like, well, I'm a carpenter, I do carpentry things, I don't do other stuff. And I've met quite a few guys that have been like that along the way as well. So another quick story for you. I was on one job when I was younger. We're converting a place into flats, I think it was, and it was in certain phases. And so the phase 1 come to an end carpentry wise, and the contractor said phase 2's not quite ready yet, so would you mind if you jumped in and done some painting, like painting on skirts and architraves and just demolition on the walls or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I don't mind. I kind of learnt by then that you've got to be a bit flexible. And there's some young carpenters there that are like, well, I'm not doing painting, I'm a carpenter, I do carpentry things. And so they sort of cleared off and they went. So they missed out on, I think there's another 2 or 3 phases of the job, where again I stayed there just because I had like a week of painting, and then we started phase 2, and then I was kind of the only one that stayed. And so I got loads and loads more work out of this contractor just because I was willing to do other things that weren't necessarily anything to do with carpentry. And I kind of bumped into one of the guys, the young lads, later on down the line, and you know, he was short of work. He didn't really, he had like lots of gaps in between jobs. And I think really that's because he wasn't willing to do things that weren't necessarily anything to do with carpentry. So I hope he learned his lesson like I did, that you need to be a bit flexible. And also now, like running my own jobs, you have to be flexible. I do a lot of painting that I don't necessarily want to do. There's also do a lot of plasterboarding on my own jobs. I do a lot of the plasterboarding and just get the plasterers to do the plastering. Also, I might be helping the roofer out if the roofer's a bit stuck and he needs help laying tiles. I'm not a roofer by any means, but I'm willing to help and chip in, and it keeps the job going. It gives you more money, and it all helps with experience. So that's my tip number 3 for you. Tip number 4, I think, is just it's not necessarily a huge one, but it can still be important, and it really help you out. And that's just watching other trades and learning things from other trades about their needs and what they require from you as a carpenter. You can get your head down and get stuck into what you're doing carpentry wise, but if you're not really aware of other trades like the plumbers and electricians, bricklayers and roofers, if you're not really aware of their needs and what things will help them, and if you don't really care about that, then they can get quite annoyed with you, and you won't have a good reputation on the site of being particularly helpful. It can be simple things like, for the plumber, like if you're doing stud walls and he needs noggins behind the plasterboard for him to fix his radiators up to. Most of the time they'll ask you to do that, but sometimes they kind of think that you'll automatically do it. And other things like, if there's a boiler going up, they need to be able to hang the boiler on something, and if you've put a construction up where there's nothing to hang their boiler onto, then they get a bit upset about that. So it's just being aware of other trades and what their needs are, and just kind of automatically doing that for them without you necessarily asking. So 9 times out of 10 they'll ask you before it's too late. When it's too late, they say, "Oh, have you done that for us?" And you'll say, "No, we didn't know you wanted that doing." And they'll be like, "Well, we always do that. That's the way you do it." And also, like, if you're doing a lot of roofing, there's things that the roofer will need and require, and yeah, it's just picking up little bits like that. So just kind of watch different trades, and don't be afraid to ask them questions. Why are you doing that? And you told me you need me to do this. Is that something that I need to do every time we come to do this, or is it just this job? And yeah, just so everybody gets along. And hopefully they'll do the same for you as well. Carpenters always have to seem to pick up all the mistakes and things that go wrong with other things, and sometimes it's nice if other trades help you out as well. So I think that'd be my tip number 4, is just to keep your eye out on other trades and help them out, and hopefully they'll help you out as well. And the last tip number 5, will be, it might not seem like a big one to you, but you'll be surprised, or it might seem like an obvious one to you, but you'll be surprised how many carpenters can't do it, or young lads that can't do it, and that is to learn how to calculate materials on jobs. You'll be surprised how many people don't know how to calculate an area for how much flooring they need or how much plasterboard they need. They kind of take a guess at how many joists they need. So really, it might seem basic, but in my experience, there's loads of people that can't do it properly, and they do guess quite a bit. So yeah, tip number 5 is learn quantities, learn areas, work out how big a sheet of plasterboard is. 8x4 sheet is 2.88 meters square. And then it goes down from there. So work things that out. If you're working out joists, work it out as an average of 400mm centres by the length of the room and all that lot. But yeah, if you can get those basic things down, like if you're working on the site and the contractor comes along and say, "Oh, we're short on some floor joists, can you go into such and such, measure up how many we need. You need to get that right, because if there's not enough, then they'll have to get more in. If you order too many, then they might be stuck with too many. So yeah, just practice that really. Like I say, on your own jobs, I have to do that all the time now, and after a while it just becomes second nature. But it's a good thing to learn early on, and if you can get that down, then that'd be a great tip for you, and it'd be really helpful, and that, you know, people can rely on you to be able to do quantities for them. So I hope you found these tips helpful, especially if you're just starting out as a carpenter or in the building trade. I hope that that's helped you out a little bit. So thanks for looking at this video, and we will catch you soon. Take care.